The ASEAN summit brings together global leaders for a series of top-level dialogue and sideline meetings. Regional security and economic cooperation take center stage. After 11 years of heated debate and controversy, a legislation for North Korean human rights goes into effect. What is expected from this new law and what challenges remain? Welcome to News Inside. I'm An Jang-hyun. Let's welcome back our panelists. Professor Shin Sang-yup from Kyung University Graduate School of International Studies is back with us, as is Dr. Pong Young-sik from Yonsei University Institute for North Korea Studies. President Park Geun-hye attended the ASEAN summit in Laos this week after wrapping up her tour to Russia and China. A number of issues took center stage at the regional gathering. We'll discuss them in more detail after this.
After wrapping up at the G20 summit in China's Hangzhou, President Park Geun-hye headed to Laos for a series of ASEAN meetings with sideline gatherings. The Association of Southeast Asian Nations consists of 10 members aiming to secure an economic, social, and cultural foundation through regional cooperation. ASEAN works not only to enhance collaboration within the regional bloc, but also with neighboring countries. This is why the regional bloc not only holds summit talks with Korea, but also the +3 nations, Korea, China, and Japan. The East Asia Summit, which follows the ASEAN gatherings, is a broader, more comprehensive meeting involving the 10 ASEAN nations as well as 8 neighboring countries to discuss economic and security issues. Especially this year, countries discussed expanding trade and investment with the goal of reaching an agreement on the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, also known as RCEP. For Seoul, these regional meetings also provide a platform to discuss and secure a consensus against North Korea's nuclear tests and missile provocations. Following a series of multilateral diplomacy, President Park, as Korea's first head of state, visits Laos to hold summit talks with President Bunyang Vorachith. Hopes are the meeting will lead not only to economic accomplishments, but also add more pressure on North Korea, one of Laos's long-standing partner countries. With a large number of countries coming together for the regional meeting, many issues will be put on the table for discussion. We look at what developments here mean for Korea and what President Park Geun-hye returns with from her latest tour.
Leaders at the ASEAN summit once again discussed North Korea's nuclear and missile program. So would you say there's now a united front against Pyongyang's weapons development?
I think so. As we know, President Park Geun-hye called for strong international unity against North Korea's nuclear and missile program. And then even at the East Asian Summit, the leaders very seriously consider to include any statements about this issue at the chairman's statements after the meeting. Secondly, South China Sea issue, the USA and China failed to reach to an agreement, but about some measures against North Korean nuclear and missile programs, they share the same stance. So I think we can say yes, there was some unity about the measures against North Korean nuclear and missile program.
Now, this regional consensus would be the result of Seoul's active diplomatic efforts. What do you think should be the next step then?
The next step is to minimize the differences between South Korea's assertion that North Korea's missile and nuclear threat is a grave concern. Not only grave, but grave and growing concern for South Korea and ASEAN countries as well. And at the same time, try to keep any positive achievements made between South Korea and China and Russia, two countries who openly and strongly express their oppositions to South Korea's own self-defensive measures, including the deployment of that system. Because Vladimir Putin, the Russian president, made it clear to President Park Geun-hye that Russia would never recognize North Korea as a de facto nuclear state. And President Xi Jinping of China also had a rather contentious and frank conversation with President Park Geun-hye, but at the end of the meeting, clearly stated that China would do everything to fully and faithfully implement the UN Security Council resolution number 2270. So you may focus on the negative things between South Korea and neighboring countries, but your best bet is to try to make the most out of any positive element already achieved by active diplomacy by President Park Geun-hye.
Now, President Park also met with U.S. counterparts Barack Obama as well as Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. So what have we seen of the dynamic among the three countries regarding regional security?
That will be highly dependent upon what Abe administration of Japan will do, because the country which is most shocked and alerted by North Korea's recent missile test, not only the most recent firing of 3 Scud ER or Nodong missiles into the within 400 kilometers of the exclusive economic zone of Japan. But Japan was also shocked by the fire of the SLBM missiles, and we all remember another missile test, 2 missiles, that one of which was fallen inside the Japan's exclusive economic zone. So I bet Abe administration will do everything and anything to urge United States and South Korea to upgrade the intelligence sharing about North Korea's missile and nuclear activities.
Now, another major issue at the ASEAN was the South China Sea, which you briefly mentioned. Where are we now in terms of the latest changes and developments?
Well, last July, the Permanent Court of Arbitration in Hague has upheld all our arguments of the Philippines in the case against China on the application of the convention, United Nations Convention of Law on the South China Sea. One thing was very clear. I mean, this issue was very, very sensitive. So all participating the countries tried to avoid exposing the differences about this issue. But certainly Prime Minister Japan, also United States, President of the United States, urged China to improve the situation in the South China Sea. Of course, the Chinese response was, as we expected, they said that, well, this is the issue. They will negotiate and then deal with the involving country on the bilateral basis, rather than the multilateral basis. Certainly, so two big countries failed to find a solution to this issue. So this is still, we have to wait and see, but definitely this remains as one of the most sensitive issues in the international community.
And the ASEAN is divided over the South China Sea issue as well, isn't it?
Right. 40% of the entire trade goes through the South China Sea. So it is an important matter for all the countries, and not only the member countries of ASEAN. But as Professor Shin mentioned, that there is a kind of a clear pattern of behavior waged by China after the PCA made a ruling against China's assertion based upon the 9-line principle, which is to divide and conquer ASEAN member countries by dangling which is more important to you, your country, as our economic partners. You want to maintain economic cooperation with China, or you want to side with Vietnam and the Philippines, and challenging the assertion of China for the sovereignty of these disputed islands. And there's also not only stick, but carrots offered by China, which is to the proposal to establish hotline based upon the Code of Conduct, COC, dealing with an urgent situation in South China Sea with related parties, which is a very important acceptance by China of the ASEAN's long-standing position. So China is not all about just bullying ASEAN nations. China is a big country, and you are small countries. But this is a very interesting, slightly different pattern to engage ASEAN countries one by one. And from the strategic standpoint of the Philippine government, this was a clear victory. The Permanent Arbitration Court ruling was a clear victory for the Philippines. The problem is that it was too much big of a victory that the Philippine government does not seem to have any follow-up plan. And
Right.
United States would also welcome the decision because it emphasized the international maritime law. But United States is also concerned about potentially reckless and excessive behavior by the Philippines, encouraged by this ruling. Then United States should be worried about unwanted entrapment into complicated situation which may require mobilization of US Navy into South China Sea. That would endanger the possibility of direct collision between China and the United States. So it's a huge victory, but something that is very difficult to be handled.
Now, Washington and Tokyo are opposed to China's territorial claims in the South China Sea, which is creating another rift in this region alongside THAAD. Now, Beijing has not hesitated to show its disapproval of the U.S. in public. So where do you see things headed from here on out?
I think we can guess what kind of the stance Chinese will keep. Basically, they want to deal with this issue on the bilateral basis, not on the multilateral basis, because USA and Japan, they have very openly stand against the Chinese position. The situation is not very favorable for the China, but China cannot give it up this issue at the moment, not only because of the domestic situation, but also the regional the situations. So China, we cannot expect the big changes on the Chinese side about this. In the policy dealing with this issue. In fact, as Dr. Bong very clearly explained, I think they seems to conflict directly about who will gain from such a kind of direct conflicts. I mean, both of them will lose. So diplomacy should be based on practical, reality, so to speak. So I think they just try to find the compromise, the position which can give some satisfaction to both sides. I mean, that's the reason why Chinese government emphasized that they will keep on discuss and negotiate with the involving countries about this issue.
So it's a very positive development for South Korea because the United States Obama administration urged South Korea to openly clarify its position with regard to the freedom of navigation principle at the South China Sea. But as you said, that even between China and ASEAN countries, there is still a lot of negotiations going on the water. It's like they both agree that some things are best left unsaid or not included in the chairman's statement. So it is not imperative for South Korea to clearly establish and declare its own position with regard to the situation in the South China Sea. So one less headache to be dealt by Park Geun-hye administration, at least for a while.
Well, the PCA ruling itself, though, may be of particular interest to Korea because of the Dokdo Island territorial dispute with Japan. What are the implications of this ruling?
Yeah, I just said that one less headache, but there's one more headache created by the ruling. That yes, the Permanent Arbitration Court's ruling on South China Sea, issue have important, not always direct, but indirect implications to South Korea protecting its sovereignty over Dokdo. Because if you read the PCA rulings, there is a heavy emphasis that it is international society's duty or related parties' duty to maintain environmental conditions of the territory as a subject of the matter. So we all remember that exactly for that reason, in 2006, the Tokyo government notified the Nomuyon government that it would send 2 scientific investigation ships to engage in a scientific inquiry in the water close to Dokdo in the name of science. So if Japanese government mistakenly try to take advantage of this part of the PAC ruling and apply it to the situation on Dokdo, saying that we need to investigate the environmental conditions in the water surrounding Dokdo. Then it will trigger a diplomatic feud between the two countries. South Korean government, just like China did, submitted the official declaration of the exclusion of the compulsory jurisdiction to ICJ, meaning that we will not engage in the court ruling to determine the sovereignty of the disputed territory, in this case, Dokdo. But as we have witnessed, that the declaration of the rejection of the compulsory jurisdiction by the international courts did not really fully prevent the China from successfully maintaining its position. I personally have been strongly encouraged by the South Korean government joining hands with the community of the international maritime law scholars have held numerous seminars and conferences to discuss exactly this matter.
Mm-hmm. Well, setting aside political differences, the ASEAN region holds a great deal of economic potential. The ASEAN Economic Community was put into motion last year. We'll take a closer look at what that is and what it has set out to achieve.
The ASEAN Economic Community was launched late last year with the goal of realizing economic integration, just like the EU. The community is based on the principle of free movement of goods, services, investments, capital, and skills. By 2030, it aims to become the fourth largest economy in the world with a GDP worth $5 trillion. The first step towards that goal is creating a single market and production base while building up infrastructure and an institutional framework. In this process, the economic community aims to reduce inequality and achieve equal development to see integration with the global economy in the final stages and boost investment in the region.
So there are 10 ASEAN member states as of now. Could you tell us more about their growth potential?
Yep. They have very huge potentiality. For Korea, in fact, this economic community became the second largest trade partner with the $119 billion trade volume as of the end of 2015. Mm-hmm. So it became very important economic partner for us. When I look at the more detailed economic indexes showing how powerful they are, out of the total global GDP, they used to produce only 4.9% in the year of 2000. But as of the end of 2015, their share increased up to 6.1%. And also in the total exports, these 10 ASEAN member countries, as of the end of 2015, accounted for 7.1% out of the total global exports. And that it was only 6.7% as of the end of 2000. So there was huge increase. Mm-hmm. And when we look at the total inward FDI in these 10 ASEAN member countries, as of the end of 2014, it was $132.8 billion, which was larger than the inward FDI in China. Mm-hmm. So we have known China as the global factory because many multinational corporations around the world have increased their investment in China to use raw but the good quality labor forces, or they can get access to one of the very largest the market in the world. But it was changed. Mm-hmm. more people, more nations started to have interest in making foreign direct investment in these 10 ASEAN member countries.
And these economies are faring well, even amid current economic climate?
Yes, in the middle of the global economic difficulties, surprisingly, many, not all, but many ASEAN member countries has recorded quite high economic growth rates. Of course, they have some problems, particularly the big differences in economic size of member countries. Some member countries have quite big economies and some others don't. But we have one very well-known economic theory. When the economic size of member countries of the economic regional integration or community, when the member countries' economic size are very similar, there must be stronger synergy effects. But in ASEAN case, there must be some big differences in terms of economic size of member countries. Secondly, well, they have quite diverse cultural backgrounds. So cultural differences can be pointed out as one of the obstacles for them to deepen and widen their economic integration. Lastly, in fact, the political instability. Some member countries are still, fail to reach to the political maturity as a democratic country in some sense. So maybe it can be a potential threat to the economic cooperation among ASEAN member countries. Because of this one, we cannot say yes, there will be a huge economic development in the near future in the ASEAN member countries, but I want to stand on the positive side rather than the negative side, forecasting about the future economy of ASEAN member countries.
What could also hamper economic cooperation within the region are the conflicting geopolitical interests of the member states. We're already seeing some countries align themselves with the US, others with China. Right.
So we need to pay attention to the ongoing debate inside the United States before the result of the presidential election will be made, which is November 8th. It is very interesting that I discovered from the US media that since 1952, the candidate who had a substantial lead over the opponent on the Labor Day, which happens to be
this past Monday,
September 5th, always won the presidential election since Dwight Eisenhower. But interestingly, Mr. Donald Trump, the Republican Party candidate, made a huge catch-up with his opponent, Senator and Secretary Hillary Clinton. So according to the CNN survey, it's a dead heat. Or according to some surveys, even Mr. Trump is slightly ahead of the Secretary Clinton. So U.S. presidential election is in a great deal of uncertainty. In addition to that, the Sino-U.S. competition is also greatly entangled. So clear forecast is very difficult to be made. So South Korea as a country who has to maintain good partnership with not just one country but both countries needs to be very patient and cautious. And in addition to the Professor Shin's analysis of the economic potential and the grouping of amongst the ASEAN countries, we need to also keep on paying attention to the domestic debate on Trans-Pacific Economic Partnership, TPP, inside the United States. So far, neither candidate is so sanguine about TPP. And the economists are not really forthright and supportive for the idea of TPP. Let me give you some examples. According to the U.S. International Trade Commission, ITC, the TPP, if signed and implemented, it would raise the United States GDP by a barely 0.15%. It's far less than the amount of a GDP the United States produces in a single day. So there's not much economic justification to be made. So TPP cannot be sold to the US citizens as something that has to be signed, to raise the U.S. economy in general and improve the living standards of individual households. So politicians are very quick to pick this up and try to just stay away from this controversial proposal of TPP.
Well, as for Laos, the host country of the ASEAN summit, it's long been a staunch supporter of North Korea. But remember, in July, President Park Geun-hye met with the Laotian Prime Minister. This time around, she met with the President of Laos. Do you think this has helped bring Laos into the fold?
Yes, I think so. Laos has been a very close country to North Korea, and some people may be critical of President Park Geun-hye spending so much time traveling, engaging in the diplomacy, but quoting more and more countries, especially countries that used to be close countries to North Korea, in times that North Korea's nuclear missile threats have been visibly increasing, is necessary and important.
Korea has a lot to gain by forging economic partnerships with the ASEAN member states. What kind of synergy can Korea create with these states, and what can we do to further promote cooperation?
To answer your question, we have to look at some changes happening inside the ASEAN member countries. There must be big changes in their economic policies and economic structure. In Asia, there have been traditional the value-added chain. Well, from Japan, we imported capital goods. By using that capital goods, we produced intermediate products, and then we export them to China. And China made the consumer products or final goods by using intermediate products imported from us. But the destination of Korean industries, intermediate products produced by Korean companies, goes not only to China but also to ASEAN member countries. This kind of trends happen in Japan and in China. Japan, well, they increased their direct exports, intermediate products to these ASEAN member countries. China also, they have increased the intermediate products exports to ASEAN member countries. And also we have to look at the percentages of consumer products from these 10 ASEAN member countries out of our total the imports of the consumer products. In case of Korea, as of the end of 2014, out of total imports from these 10 ASEAN member countries, the consumer products, final goods accounted for 18.7%. In case of China, 8.7%. And surprisingly, in case of Japan, the 21.2% were the consumer products or final goods out of total imported products from these 10 ASEAN member countries. They used to buy some products and they used to use them, but they became a center of production. So there has been big change in the economic structure of these other 10 member countries, which means they became a factory of the regional economy. Then we can get an answer to how we can cooperate with each other with these 10 ASEAN member countries. We have to find a way how to strengthen our economic cooperation in in such a kind of new circumstances.
In other news, Seoul's North Korean Human Rights Act went into effect on September 4th, 11 years after it was first introduced in Parliament. What significance does this hold, and what challenges lie ahead?
In South Korea, a law aimed at improving human rights in the north went into effect on September 4th. According to the new legislation, Seoul will collect data from North Korean defectors to build up a platform to prosecute perpetrators of heinous human rights crimes in the future. A foundation launched under Seoul's Ministry of Unification will oversee research and development to improve human rights in the north and support projects that had mostly been led by the private sector. Calls to draw up legislation related to North Korea's human rights problems have been made since 2005. With an acute understanding about the severity of abuses in the north, the challenge for the South now is to take concrete action.
The fact that the international community can say that now we know what's going on in North Korea is a huge psychological factor because before the Kim dynasty, the Kim family and the Pyongyang regime can do whatever they want and nobody was paying much attention to them. Now they know that every crime that they commit, that there's monitoring mechanism, that people are watching. So that's a huge factor. And now the second message that has to go to North Korea is that not only do we know, but we're gonna do something about it.
Just last month, President Park Geun-hye also said Seoul will not turn its back on the sufferings of the North Korean people during her Liberation Day speech. She notably addressed cadres in the North and members of the public.
북한 당국의 간부들과 모든 북한 주민 여러분, 통일은 여러분 모두가 어떠한 차별과 불이익 없이 동등하게 대우받고 각자의 역량을 마음껏 펼치며 행복을 추구할 수 있는 새로운 기회를 제공할 것입니다.
The UN and global community are also taking action through sanctions. Back in July, Washington placed leader Kim Jong-un on a sanctions list, holding him directly responsible for cruelty and hardship on his people. Meanwhile, through state media, Pyongyang has strongly condemned Seoul's Human Rights Act and Washington's Human Rights Report submitted to Congress. As Seoul's North Korean Human Rights Act takes its first step in raising further awareness and documenting egregious violation of human rights, many hope it will also send a strong message to the North Korean leadership.
So this law is aimed at improving human rights conditions in North Korea, but why the 11-year holdup?
11 years. Since in 2003, the UN Human Rights Council passed a resolution to address the human rights violation inside North Korea. I think the delay is a clear reflection of perennial dilemma that South Korea has to solve in its pursuit of peaceful unification with North Korea. And this matter, North Korean human rights, have been subject to the domestic political debates and clash of different ideologies. From the progressive side, that the more important priorities was to improve the overall inter-Korean relations through economic cooperations and reduction of tension. On the other hand, the conservatives would argue that human rights are absolute values that should not be subjected to strategic or instrumentalist calculation. And it is absurd to try to justify North Korea's violation of basic human rights in the name of North Korea's own so-called endogenous way of life. So it is an ongoing debate which priority should be prioritized. But early in the stage, in 2003, the representatives of South Korea in the United Nations used to just abstain from voting. But South Korea will be the chair country of the United Nations Human Rights Council starting next year. Mm-hmm. So the view that human rights cannot be negotiated in the name of political interest or military strategy began to trump.
Mm. So in the end, this law has finally been enacted. Pyongyang has little reason to be happy about it. In fact, it test-fired more missiles the day after this law went into effect, which also coincided with the G20 summit. So is Pyongyang trying to send a message here?
I think so. Personally, I do not understand the reason why the North Korean government made such a kind of decision. But we can think about why they did it. I think the North Korean government tried to give a very clear message to the North Korean people. No one can stop us. I mean, I think on the part of the North Korean regime, maybe on the short-term basis, it can be very effective. But I think this decision will lead to another wave of the difficulties, which will hit the North Korean economies and North Korean politics. I think, they have been success in giving a very clear message to the people, not only North Koreans, but also the global community. But I think it can be one of the serious mistakes ever made by North Korean regime.
Yeah, I agree with Professor Shin that it's very counterproductive that North Korea being such hypersensitive to anything related to international criticism of its human rights. And I think it shows the fragile and dangerous aspects of the Kim Jong-un leadership, very inflexible.
So the question now is whether this law will actually have the desired impact, because there's been criticism that it's lacking substance or effective tools for implementation. After all, the North is going to do what it always does.
Well, if you measure North Korea's problem with human rights violation by its size, weight, nature, then it's a huge problem. So any resolution would be short of being complete and effective by absolute standard. But you got to start from somewhere. You have to start from somewhere. So this is a clear and official declaration that South Korea is resolved as a sovereign country dedicated to human rights and democratic values, will do everything and anything at its capacity to try to help North Korean citizens from violation of their human rights. Most important and practical measure I see in this human rights law act is the keeping the record. Following the case of the West Germany, that when German unification actually took place, that the reservoir of archival official record was extremely important and legally binding evidence to prosecute those who actually had committed gross violation of human rights. You need more than just personal testimonies of the defectors and victims to charge those who violated the basic human rights of North Korean citizens.
Well, similar human rights laws also exist in the U.S. and Japan. So could we find some significance in the fact that this act is now being enforced here in South Korea?
Well, I'd like to just highlight what is a little bit missing in South Korea's act, which is that the subject of this act is confined to North Korean residents inside North Korea in most parts. So there is still much to be desired in terms of providing more protection and support for North Koreans outside the country and the defectors. But as I said, that no act will be perfect.
Right.
And compared to Japan's own act, which was passed early in 2006, it is more comprehensive and general. The purpose of the Japan's act was focused on the abducted issues. So in that regard, that South Korea's act has its own strength and weakness.
Well, we have to wrap up. Your final thoughts of the week.
Well, the global community, global economy has been in bad shape over the several years, and then we cannot expect that the global economy can easily overcome the difficulties. Korea is in trouble. In economy, we have some difficulties. So I think the relationship or economic cooperation with the ASEAN member countries seems to be very important for us to overcome the economic difficulties. So I wish the Korean government put more priorities on the economic cooperation with the ASEAN member countries and commit themselves to strengthen and widen the economic cooperation with 10 ASEAN member countries.
Dr. Bong?
I'll comment on North Korea. It seems like, having observed North Korea's behavior with nuclear and missile programs, it seems like North Korean leadership has an impeccable sense of spoiling somebody else's celebration and good mood. So we are going to celebrate our Chuseok holiday, Korea's Thanksgiving holidays. So North Korea may engage in another provocation that would spoil our celebratory mood.
Don't they have Chuseok too, though?
That's good. Right, that's right. So they may restrain
maybe
themselves.
They'll have the days off, who knows. Well, thank you very much, Dr. Bong and Professor Shin, for sharing your thoughts with us today. That is all for this edition of News Inside. Thank you for watching. We'll be back with more next week.